3 weeks after I finished a 400-mile hike through the Australian Outback, I developed my photographs and discovered the same person standing in the background of 14 different images. The photographs had been taken weeks apart, hundreds of miles apart, and the figure was always standing at exactly the same distance. The strange part wasn't that someone appeared in the pictures. The strange part was that I never saw them, not once. And by the time I realized where they first appeared, I understood something that still bothers me now. Whoever it was had been there from the beginning. I wasn't new to the Outback. I'd spent years hiking remote country, the sort of places where you stop thinking in miles and start thinking in water bottles. My pack smelled permanently of dust, sunscreen, and instant coffee. Every morning started the same way: boil water, pack camp, check bearings, walk. The silence out there is difficult to explain. The Outback was completely silent. Not quiet, silent. No traffic, no distant machinery. Just wind. Sometimes not even that. If this is your first time here, stay. This story earns it. 9 weeks into the trip, I finished the route without incident. No injuries, no equipment failures, no strange encounters. At least, that's what I believed. These are the kinds of things that don't make sense until suddenly they do. 3 weeks later, I was developing film in my darkroom. The room smelled of chemicals and wet paper. I remember being annoyed because one photograph looked ruined. There was a tiny dark shape near the horizon. At first, I assumed it was dirt. Then I developed another image. Same shape, different location, different week. I put both photographs side by side. The shape was still there, standing upright, human-shaped, far away. A few minutes later, I nearly convinced myself I'd solved it. A scratching sound came from behind me. My hands stopped working properly for a second. Then I turned around. It was just a loose vent cover moving in the air. Ordinary, completely ordinary. But when I looked back at the photographs, I realized something worse. The figure wasn't standing in different places. It was standing at the same distance every time. Over the next week, I examined every photograph from the trip. 14 images contained the figure. 14. The earliest photograph had been taken during week 1. I should have noticed that earlier. Because week 1 meant something important. It meant the figure appeared before I ever felt watched, before I ever looked over my shoulder, before I had any reason to think another human being was nearby. The Outback was completely silent, not quiet, silent. One photograph bothered me more than the others. Night 41. A campsite beside a dry creek bed. Nothing remarkable had happened there, at least nothing I remembered. But the figure looked larger. Not closer, larger, as if the camera had captured more detail. I scanned the image professionally. Then I hired 2 separate imaging analysts. Both confirmed the same thing. No signs of manipulation, no editing, no double exposure. The figure existed in the original negatives. If you're still with me, imagine discovering evidence that someone was present during your most isolated moments, and you never saw them once. That was the point I stopped sleeping properly. I returned to the Night 41 photograph. Again, and again, and again. There was something wrong with it. Something small. Something ordinary. The campfire. My fire had gone out. I remembered that clearly. The only time in 9 weeks. The only night I woke up cold. The only night I remember opening my eyes after midnight. And suddenly I remembered something else. A shape, standing beyond the firelight. Not moving, not approaching, just standing there. I told myself it was a tree. There were no trees. I told myself it was exhaustion. I told myself a lot of things. I know how this sounds. I know exactly how this sounds. But that memory had been sitting in the back of my mind for years, waiting. The dry creek bed was completely silent. Not quiet, silent. I still have the photographs. The analysts still can't explain them, and neither can I. What bothers me most isn't the figure, it's the distance. The exact same distance, across hundreds of miles, as though it wasn't following me, as though it was guiding me somewhere. If you're still here, you already understand why this story bothered me. Subscribe if you want the next file. There's one photograph I haven't mentioned. The final photograph. The one taken at the end of the trail. Because when I enlarged it, the figure wasn't standing behind me anymore. It was standing in front of the camera. And if you ever find yourself completely alone in a place that should be empty, you might want to ask yourself who reached the destination first.